Welcome to episode 6 of the Chronic Back Pain Roadmap. In this episode, we're going to delve deeper again, but this time into the mind and personalities of people suffering with chronic back pain. And the governing question is going to be, what kind of person suffers with back pain in spite of their best efforts? As we'll discuss in this episode, there are certain behavioral traits, personality types, and life experiences that can make us more likely to experience pain. But before we get into all of this, I want to be clear that this isn't about blame or blaming ourselves for why we're in pain. We're going to talk about behavior, habits, and beliefs, and how our circumstances are largely the product of our own decisions. Now, this can rub people the wrong way, and it can sound like you're being blamed for the situation you're in, and that's not what I'm saying. In fact, most of our behavior and beliefs are unconscious, so because of this, we can actually act against our own interests without even noticing it. So if you're resistant to this idea, please bear with me until the end of this episode. I'm going to outline my position and show how, ultimately, we have the control when it comes to our health, and that while others may have wronged or hurt us in the past, how we respond to that and what becomes of our lives is ultimately our responsibility. And I'm going to frame this in a way that hopefully allows you to see the power and control that this gives you without feeling guilt for your situation. So, our behaviors and actions shape our lives. And this is illustrated well by a quote from somatic educator F.M. Alexander. He explains that people do not decide their futures, they decide their habits, and their habits decide their futures. So everything that you have now is because you're in the habit of doing it. So if you have stiff joints, it's because your lifestyle and the actions you take on a daily basis contribute to the stiffening of your joints. Sometimes it's easier to take this idea on board when we look at it from the point of view of positive behaviors. So what's something that you're good at? Something that the average person might struggle with or be unfamiliar with. For some people, it's painting or writing or building or perhaps a specific sport or computer coding or public speaking and so on. Whatever it is that you're good at is because you're in the habit of doing that specific thing. Of course, certain people have genetic predispositions and physical traits that make them particularly suitable for certain activities, but ultimately they are good at what they do because they are in the habit of doing it. The example I often use is that Arnold Schwarzenegger's physical achievements are no accident. They're the result of him choosing and sticking to certain habits over others. So while it may be unpleasant to acknowledge, the negative traits we display and that create our undesirable circumstances, those traits and those habits are our own, and we're acting them out. Of course, it's not as easy as acknowledging this and then the problem goes away. Of course, there are environmental factors that influence us. Our upbringing, our parents, our socioeconomic status, our peers, the part of the world that we're born in, and all sorts of other random and unfortunate circumstances that can simply be chalked up to bad luck. All of these things are relevant. Of course they are. But as long as our current circumstances are the fault of others, then we remain powerless in our recovery. We remain passive and we remain victims. On the other hand, if we can acknowledge all of our challenges and the unfortunate cards we've been dealt, we can make the most of our situations. We can retain control and remain in control of how we perceive our circumstances, because so much of it comes down to how we perceive things. The exact same event or interaction can be perceived completely differently based on the individual. For example, if someone cuts you off in traffic, you might get annoyed and assume the worst about this person. Or you might assume that they must have had a good reason to do something so dangerous. Maybe they needed to get to the hospital as quickly as possible. While they happen quickly, automatically, and sometimes irrationally, the interpretations are our own, so I believe it's worth investigating and learning about how and why we think the way we do, and how this may be contributing to our persistent pain. The biggest challenge when considering this is that there are reasons why we act against our best interests. You see, our unconscious beliefs aren't easily changed, and they're there for a reason. They're there to protect us. Because the brain has no reason to keep these detrimental beliefs unless it believes that they're helpful on some level. So we need to recognize that what we consciously want may be at odds with our unconscious beliefs, and this is simply called incongruence, where you're essentially living at odds with what you really want. A simple exercise you can try is to write down the things you want and the things that you need to act on to get what you want. For example, you might want to be out of pain. So what do you need to get out of pain? Do you need to stick to a mobility program? Do you need to change your diet, perhaps sleep more? Do you need to work on reducing stress? Do you need to change your relationships or your job? So think about that for a second. Now, what you're going to do is to say out loud what you want and whether you believe you can actually achieve it. For this, you should find a comfortable position and relax so that you can observe your internal sensations. Now, say it out loud. I want to be pain-free, and just sit with that. How does that feel? How does it sound? Is it convincing, confident? Does it stir up any discomfort within you? And you can pause the video and think about that. Next, you can say out loud, I deserve to be pain-free. I deserve to get better. And just sit with those thoughts. And then I want you to ask yourself these questions for each of the items on your list. Ask whether you can achieve them and whether you deserve to achieve them, and evaluate how your body responds and whether or not things ring true to you. The challenge with this method is that it requires a lot of awareness of yourself and the ability to scan internally and notice changes in sensations. Hopefully it's enough to make you question whether or not you really believe that you can or that you deserve to get better. For many people, it can plant enough of a grain of doubt that you begin to notice the many ways in which you act and think against your best interests. The next thing I'd like you to consider is that your personality may be relevant in your experience of pain. In many cases, those who suffer with chronic health issues tend to be natural caregivers. The theory is quite straightforward. Natural caregivers put others ahead of themselves, and they have a tendency to neglect their own needs in favor of those of others. And this is summed up quite nicely by the saying, you can't pour from an empty cup. And it's why on planes you're supposed to put your own oxygen mask on first before you help others, because you can be of more service to others if you're at your best. It's a challenging thing to grapple with because it's generally born out of compassion and care for others, but it comes at a cost. So you may ask yourself if this sounds like you. And for now, all I'd like to do is to offer that question as food for thought, just for you to reflect on it. Now, the final strategy you can try is to take some time to consider meaningful experiences of your past and how they may still be affecting you. Trauma, both severe and mild, can have a lasting effect on the body, and that can be either physical, emotional, or psychological trauma, because it all takes a physical toll on the mind and body. An exercise you can try to help with this is to list any major life experiences that have left a lasting negative imprint on you. Anything significant, like the loss of someone you love, or physical or emotional abuse, or anything that challenged your view of the world. Then anything that relates to guilt or shame is going to be particularly worth exploring. Now, with that list, if you talk about each of these experiences, what comes up for you? Do you still feel emotionally invested or affected by what happened? Does that experience have a sort of negative charge to it, so to speak? Or can you talk and think about it comfortably, as if you're a detached observer of what happened? Then, if you identify any major life experiences that still have an effect on you, you may want to consider addressing these if your pain isn't responding to any other means of treatment. Now, you need to use your own judgment at this time. Some of these traumatic experiences are not to be explored without the help of a trained professional. You need to decide for yourself how you want to go about this. You can work with a trained counselor or psychotherapist, or even talk to a friend or family member. That way you can make sure you have the support you need if you delve into more than you can handle at one time. Now, for milder issues, and if you're feeling resilient enough, you can also try expressive writing therapy. In a nutshell, this involves detailing all aspects of the relevant experience, outlining the sights, sounds, smells, and sensations, and most of all, how it made you feel and how it affected you. It's about expressing yourself. It's basically a way of letting it all out for your mind to be relieved and have an opportunity to sort through these experiences. If practiced over a couple of days, you should find that a lot of these experiences no longer hold any power over you. It's like a tension has been relieved and weight has been removed from your shoulders. And even as a general daily practice, it can be hugely beneficial to document your day, your thoughts, and your reactions. It can help then relieve unnecessary stress, especially if you're prone to anxiety and overthinking things. And I've included an expressive writing therapy template in the resources section for this episode, so be sure to check that out if you suspect that this is relevant to your pain. Now, beyond these strategies, I'm not comfortable making more specific recommendations. Like with the previous episodes, when things get to this point, we have to be cautious with how we proceed. We have to work with the body rather than against it. This means recognizing its elaborate survival mechanisms and challenging these only with the right support and resources. If you suspect that your past experiences, your beliefs, and your ways of thinking are relevant to your pain, I'd recommend you try these 3 strategies I outlined in this episode. And if you're ready to delve deeper and want guidance through this process, I have online courses and coaching programs specifically geared towards these kinds of issues. You can even sign up for a free coaching call with me to determine whether or not this is right for you, and I'll be happy to evaluate what's missing in your recovery and point you in the right direction. My goal with this series has been to walk you through a logical process of evaluating your pain and its root cause. My hope is that at this point you should have a reasonable understanding of what's causing your pain. My contention is that so many people waste time and money pursuing treatments that aren't appropriate for their needs. So I designed this chronic back pain roadmap as a sort of triage method to help you make sense of the world of pain relief so that you can get the treatment you need without wasting time and money on things that aren't suitable for you. So thank you so much for taking the time to watch this. I hope I was able to point you in the right direction. But if you're still confused, don't hesitate to reach out to me and I'll see what I can do to help. I personally know what it's like to be in pain with no end in sight. Thankfully, I learned that it doesn't have to be so complicated. So my goal has become to help people to see what took me years to learn, so that they can get back to living a life without pain and get back to the things they love. So that's it for this final episode of the series. Don't forget to subscribe and follow the Back Pain Coach on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. And be sure to sign up to the newsletter, and I'll make sure to provide all the resources you need to get better. Thanks again for watching, and have a great day.